From the Journals of Dipper Pines, when I got back to the McGucket house, I left my new bike in the drive and hurried inside and up to the room where Mabel was in bed. As I approached it, Grunkle Stan stood in the hall outside her door and held a finger to his lips and whispered, "She's sleeping." Well, not exactly whispered. When Grunkle Stan whispers, it sounds like a cement mixer with strep throat. Fiddleford McGucket edged quietly out of the room, closed the door noiselessly, and nodded at me. "She's resting comfortably, and that probably will help her as much as any medicine could do. That mark on her hand is worrisome, though. I've seen something like it before." I had to bite my tongue to keep from asking him questions, but I did say, "You don't sound as folksy as usual." McGucket shrugged and, under his bushy white whiskers, gave me a kind of grin. "Shucks, that they're rantin' and roarin's only for public consumption. When people think you're an unpredictable wild-eyed hillbilly hootenanny jobbernoll with a raccoon-ferris spouse and probable homicidal tendencies, they gives you a wide berth, and I likes bein' let alone, by cracky." He did a little hambone patting and then stamped the floor, but lightly, soundlessly, with his right foot before smacking his leg. "Now cut that out." "McGucket is as sane as I am," Grunkle Stan said. "Not that that's any great recommendation." "Speaking of sanity, McGucket, what's the deal with the raccoon?" McGucket chuckled. "Well, for a long time there, I didn't have any regular income. Now, in Gravity Falls there are laws about various things. Some few years back I found this bad hurt young raccoon kit. Knew it wouldn't survive in the wild, so I took it in. But there's a $100 fee for getting a license to rehabilitate wildlife. A marriage license is only $2. So I claimed I was gonna marry the critter and saved myself $98. Course really she's just a pet, not a wife, but it just goes to show you that even when I was fair real nutso I was smart enough to find a nice legal loophole." Stan slapped him on the shoulder. "You're my kinda guy." "Hey, Dip, whatcha got there?" I showed them the wrapped shadow box. The specimen that Grunkle Ford wanted. "He's in my lab," McGucket said, "researchin' on the internet. He still ain't too good at it, if you want to know the truth. The dimensions he was stuck in for 30 years didn't have no connectivity, I reckon. So I took the shadow box with the butterflies down through the maze of hallways to the former kitchen, where I found Grunkle Ford hunched over one of Fiddleford's many computers. He looked up when I came in. I held up the box, and his expression changed from annoyance to relief and happiness. "Good work, Dipper. I trust that Mr. Northwest raised no objections to our borrowing the specimen?" No," Dipper said, unwrapping the frame. "He didn't say one word against it." He handed the shadow box over. Stanford held the shadow box to view the specimens inside without any glare on the glass. "Let me see, yes, here it is, in the top row. It's frustrating, but the computer network of information barely mentions this particular subspecies. Here, let me carefully remove the one we're interested in." He put the frame on a lab table and removed the glass. Once it was off, Dipper could see that each butterfly had been identified in very faint ink and in extremely tiny handwriting. Beneath the orange fritillary in the top row, someone had written, "Beloria viridida. Gravity Falls, Oregon, June 6, 1953. Periodic." Dipper leaned close, a musty odor in his nostrils, and read it aloud. "What does that mean, periodic?" Stanford Pines had removed the pin holding the specimen in place and, using forceps, had transferred the insect to a platform beneath a 6-inch diameter magnifying glass. "Ah. That means that the Gravity Falls fritillary shows up in great numbers about once every 29 or 30 years. Then there'll be 2 or 3 years when they're abundant, as they are this year, and afterwards the numbers taper off dramatically and for years you can find only 1 or 2 out in the woods." "Isn't that kind of unusual?" Dipper asked. His great-uncle Ford had removed his glasses and bent close to the magnifying glass to peer at the butterfly. "Well, for Lepidoptera, yes. Common in cicadas, of course. You've probably heard of 17-year locusts, which aren't locusts at all, by the way. However, periodicity isn't unheard of. Some of the nymphea exhibit the trait, that is, like our friend here, they can be abundant 1 year and scarce the next. However, a 30-year period is unique, I think. I don't know if the caterpillars hibernate over the winters for all that time as they slowly mature, or if it's a variation in food supply or what. Frustrating. I'm frankly surprised no one's done a paper on them. You'd think entomology grad students would jump at the chance. Now, this is very strange. What is? Look through the glass and I'll point it out to you. Dipper took Ford's place and gazed at a much magnified image of the orange butterfly. A needle pointer came into view. Grunkle Ford said, "Here. Look very closely." Dipper looked at the spiral proboscis, looking like a flat spring. The needle, so magnified that it looked as if it were the size of a chopstick and trembling, pointed out the very end, where the tongue-like organ ended in a tiny arrowhead shape, somewhat curved to a wickedly sharp point, shiny and dark brown. "What about it?" Dipper asked. "Well, it looks as if this butterfly is adapted not to sipping flower nectar through this, but to piercing something, berry skins, perhaps, or conceivably even animal or insect flesh, though that would be unheard of, to feed. A typical butterfly proboscis is just a hollow tube. The insect sucks up flower nectar and dew through it, sometimes it will also probe the ground with the tip, searching for minerals, especially sodium, that it needs. That's called puddling, by the way. Or it doesn't have to feed exclusively on flowers, of course, a butterfly will feed on burst or rotten fruit, like peaches or grapes, or even on urine and dung." Dipper said, making a mental note never again to touch a butterfly unless he was wearing thick leather gloves. Stanford used the needle to probe the sharp point, moving it a little. This one, though, well, maybe that little arrowhead-like sheath could pierce a grape or the skin of a piece of fruit. "Or human skin?" Dipper asked. Ford smiled. "Dipper, in the whole history of the entire natural world no butterfly in existence ever feasted on human blood." "Does the entire natural world necessarily include gravity falls?" Dipper asked. With a sigh, Ford agreed, "Good point. The rules of nature don't always apply here, do they?" Dipper stared closely at the sharp-looking tip of the specimen's proboscis. "Grunkle Ford, if that could pierce skin, do you think it could leave a mark like the one on Mabel's hand?" "Possibly," Stanford replied slowly. "Of course, a puncture wound from something like this would be minute, scarcely visible to the naked eye. Unless, perhaps, the butterfly could move its little needle very fast, like, a sewing machine. Then I suppose it might outline a triangle." Then he adjusted the specimen on the viewing platform and murmured, "Speaking of which, these markings on the wings are eerily regular, aren't they?" The needle barely touched one of the dark brown triangles on the lower wings, under magnification made up of richly colored overlapping scales with oddly toothed edges. "The marking looks less like something natural than something man-made, or something printed. Almost as if sketched out with the aid of a ruler." "A ruler? Like Bill's Cipher?" Dipper asked. His great-uncle shook his head. "No, I simply mean a straight edge, a guide so the lines will be straight and even. That kind of ruler, not a crazed demonic dictator. Still, triangles. Bill. Just a coincidence?" Dipper asked. "I don't know, Dipper. I just don't know. Great-Uncle Ford, do you think this fritillary might have, I don't know, some kind of venom? Has Mabel been poisoned?" "Doubtful, Dipper. Once again, no butterfly ever recorded has been capable of producing poison. They are not preying insects. For one to evolve such a capability would be unheard of." "So what's next?" "Well, I'm going to take some microphotographs of this specimen. I'll also try a spectroscopic reading of the proboscis, just in case there's any trace of unusual chemical substances. I'm in touch with some noted entomologists at Oregon State University and UC Riverside. I'll send them my findings and we'll see what they say." His heart beating a little too fast, Dipper asked, "Is Mabel going to be all right?" Ford put a reassuring hand on Dipper's shoulder. "I'm sure she will be. Even assuming the worst, an insect this size couldn't possibly inject her with any venom that would make her seriously ill. And unless one is severely allergic, even a hornet's sting is at most a source of acute discomfort. Mabel will probably wake up completely well, but just to be on the safe side, I'll continue my research. I'll have to write Mr. Northwest a note of thanks. I'll run it over on my bike, Dipper said quickly. Sounding half lost in thought, Stanford replied, "Thank you." "Yes, sir, this is an extremely interesting butterfly. Most peculiar indeed. Harmless, I'm sure, but a most peculiar specimen." Dipper could only hope that he was right. From the Journals of Dipper Pines, Thursday, June 20th. It's only 9 p.m. but I'm too tired to write much. Mabel didn't wake up the whole time I was over at McGucket's. I got back to the shack at 6, had a little dinner that I didn't feel like eating with Sus, Melody, and Sus's abuelita, and then just climbed up the stairs to the attic and lay back on my bed. I'd pulled back the curtain dividing our room. Looking over at Mabel's empty bed made my chest feel empty and achy. But then a little after 7, she called me. "Hey, Broboat," she said, her voice sounding really tired and draggy. "Mabel! How are you?" I asked. "I'll come right over." No, that's all right," she told me. "I think I'm okay. Just, pooped. So I'm gonna stay here and try to get a good night's sleep. Maybe I'll be my old self tomorrow. Come and have breakfast with me?" "You got it, sis." "Okay. 8 o'clock. 8. I'll be there." Awkward sibling good night? Sincere sibling good night, sis. Sleep well. You too, Dip. Well, she did sound more normal, only sort of slowed down. Maybe she really was just tired, or maybe it was a touch of some mild bug. So. Good night, beautiful assistant. I miss you. Dreams. They happen in what Grunkle Ford called the mindscape, in the place inside all of our heads, that other world of imagination and joy, of wonder and terror. Dipper had known good dreams and bad ones, and the bad had included some doozies with Bill Cipher as the featured player more often than most people. Dipper had lucid dreams, the kind in which he knew he was really asleep and dreaming. When he was lucky, he could even control a lucid dream. That's how he once persuaded Wendy Corduroy to tell him she loved him hopelessly. However, most of the time his dreams were the ordinary kind that everyone had, though he was better at remembering the details than other people. That night he had just disconnected flashes of dreams, nothing in sequence, nothing like a story, but just images, really. He heard something tapping at the window, and when he opened it about 1,000,000 of the butterflies swirled there, hurling themselves at the glass until he slipped up the sash and gave them a way in, and then they flowed in like an orange flood. They seemed to settle on him, covering him, and he felt himself growing weak and faint. Then that was gone, and somehow Pacifica was making fun of him because he didn't know how to ride a pony and fell off every time he tried to get into Desperado's saddle. He stubbornly tried again and again, winding up covered with smelly, mucky mud, until Desperado looked back over his shoulder and said, "You're hopeless, kid." Next time had passed and the summer was over and school in Piedmont had started again, but when he walked out to the bus and got aboard, he realized that the seat next to him was empty. Mabel was gone. "No," he groaned, tossing in his bed. For some time, Dipper floated just beneath the surface of waking. He had seen a TV show about a magician attempting a daring escape from a sealed trunk dropped through a hole in lake ice. He had made it out of the trunk, only to find that he had drifted from the hole, and the frozen surface locked him away from the life-giving air. It was like that with Dipper, suffocating, not fully asleep but not able to wake up. Now he heard voices, 2 of them sounding distant but clear, urging him, "Help her. Help her. Wake up and go help her." MFFGH, Dipper moaned, trying to break through the barrier and into consciousness. One of the voices said, "SHH, let me try." "Dipper. This is twin telepathy. Mabel's in big trouble. You gotta go help her, man." As though he had touched a live wire, Dipper convulsed and rolled out of bed, landing with an echoing thud on his hands and knees. For a moment his chest heaved, but he couldn't get his breath. Then it came with a deep gasp. He tore off his underwear, the only thing he had been sleeping in, and grabbed a fresh pair from his suitcase, which he still hadn't unpacked. He pulled on walking shorts, a t-shirt, his old navy blue traveler's vest, then socks and shoes, and finally he grabbed his trucker hat and rushed out. But Seuss met him on the stairway. "What's up, dude?" he asked. "You like shook the whole place there. Drop something?" "Seuss," Dipper panted. "Listen, I know it sounds crazy, and I don't know how I know it, but I do. Mabel needs me, man. I gotta get to the McGucket house. Can you help me, please?" Seuss didn't hesitate. "Go get in the Jeep, dog. I'll pull on some pants and be there in a second." "Thanks, man." Dipper took the stairs down 2 at a time, raced out the back door and over to the Jeep, and climbed in. He was taking deep gasping breaths of the cool, pine-scented air, but his heart refused to beat more slowly. Dipper fumbled with the seatbelt, but even before he had it buckled, Seuss came hustling out, now wearing his old question-mark t-shirt, brown shorts, and brown cap. He slid into the driver's seat and fired up the engine. "Belt fastened, dude? Hang on." The Jeep's tires spun, and Dipper heard the spattering of gravel into underbrush as the wheels fought for traction. Then they lurched forward, fishtailed as they made the hard turn onto the road, and headed for town. I'm sorry, Dipper said over and over again, apologizing not to Seuss but to Mabel. "Calm down, Dipper," Seuss said, drifting the Jeep into a long curve. "What happened, dude?" "Oh, I'm not even sure. I just have this strong sense that Mabel needs me." "See, I had this weird dream," Dipper said. "Oh, man, I saw a TV show about this," Seuss replied. "It was all about twins, like you and Hambone, and how they got this special occult mental connection or some junk. Like there was this pair of twins, one was in New York and one was in Germany, and the one in Germany broke his leg and the one in New York woke up with his own leg all swollen up like a super big bratwurst and he knew something had happened. And there were these other two, they could be miles apart, but no matter what the distance was, if one of them made an ice cream, the other got brain freeze. Spooky stuff. So what was yours, Dipper? Broken leg or brain freeze?" "Neither one, actually. I just heard a voice telling me that Mabel needs help, right now." "Her voice?" "No, a boy's voice. Well, it sounded more like mine. Sounds stupid now that I'm talking about it. It may be just a dream, man. No worries, bro. We gotta check it out." Dipper mentally kicked himself for not having picked up his cell phone before leaving the shack. Seuss hadn't brought his either, but he made good time, blowing through the stop signs in Gravity Falls. There wasn't much danger. Nobody was out at 2 a.m. on a hazy Friday morning. Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland were more than likely off duty and fast asleep. Anyway, aside from an odd deer or two way off on the shoulder, they saw no sign of life. Seuss took a shortcut through a neighborhood where all the houses were dark, except for one in which a dim yellow light outlined one upstairs window. Somebody's sick there, Dipper thought. And then, from nowhere, another thought, no. Somebody's waiting there to die. He started to shiver. How did I know that? Seuss braked in the curved drive of the mansion, and before the Jeep had even stopped moving, Dipper jumped out and raced up the front steps. The door stood open. He tore inside, yelling, "Grunkle Stan! Grunkle Ford!" By the time he was on the stair to the second floor, lights were coming on up there. Grunkle Stan came shuffling out of his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "Dipper! Hot Belgian waffles, kid, what's wrong?" "Gotta check on Mabel," Dipper gasped, opening the door of her bedroom. Behind him, Grunkle Stan said, "Seuss. You too? This better not be a flash rave or whatever." Dipper didn't hear Seuss's reply. He stood in the doorway, feeling relief. Across the darkened room, Mabel lay under the covers. False alarm, he said. Or was it? Mabel wasn't making her usual nighttime mum-mum noises. Dipper crossed the floor and put a hand on her shoulder. Too soft. He ripped the covers back. A pillow had been left beneath the coverlet, but no Mabel. The light flicked on, and Dipper turned, fighting back panic. Both Stanford and Stanley stood in the doorway, and behind them loomed Seuss. "She's gone," Dipper said. They checked the bathroom down the hall. No luck. Dipper told them that he had found the front door open. "She must have gone out," Grunkle Stan said. "She must have got dressed, but didn't take her shoes," Grunkle Stan said, holding up a pair of black slip-on flats. "Socks either." "Well, she can't get very far barefoot," Ford told them. "Come with me." He led them to a small room on the third floor, full of electronic equipment and monitors. Ford turned them on, found the monitor labeled Main, and pointed to it. At the moment it showed the view toward the street from above the front door of the mansion. Seuss's Jeep was the main feature. "I'll rewind this." He did. Seuss's Jeep appeared to back away and out through the gates, always open these days. Then a little further on, a small figure seemed to jog in a jerky way back down the drive and up the steps. Ford put the recording back into forward mode. The camera was set for night vision, so everything was blurry and had a green tinge, but they saw Mabel, unmistakable even in that distorted image, hurrying down the steps, then away down the drive. Ford checked the timestamp. She left not long after midnight. "Where does she think she's going?" "Back to my old house?" "Dude," Seuss said, "she's not going to the shack, because we would have passed her, and we didn't." "Creepy Hollow," Dipper said. "That's where she's going. To meet the butterflies." "You can't know that," Grunkle Ford said. "I do know it," Dipper insisted. "Be reasonable, Dipper, you be reasonable, Poindexter." Grunkle Stan exclaimed. "Hey, you told me that you knew the instant Mom had her heart attack, even though you were in some alternate dimension place." "That was different." "I don't think so, Mr. Pines," Seuss said. "Dipper and Mabel are like super close. They kind of feel each other's feelings sometimes. Trust him. If we hurry, maybe we can head her off, get there before she does," Dipper said. Seuss nodded. "We'll go in the Jeep." Dude, where's Creepy Hollow?" "I'll give you directions," Dipper said. "Come on, let's go." "Give me 5 minutes to get some equipment together," Stanford Pines said. "Stanley, you go pack some food for us, anything portable, fruit, crackers, bottled water, anything easy to carry. Throw it into one of Fiddleford's grocery totes. Oh, and one more thing, Stanley." Grunkle Stan had been heading out the door. He turned and growled, "Yeah? Put some pants on." "Ooh," Grunkle Stan said. "Hoity-toity." He headed out again and ran smack into Fiddleford McGucket. "I heard enough," the old man said. "I may go in too. And I may bring in old Betsy." "No firearms," Ford cautioned. "Who said anything about dang firearms?" McGucket brandished a baseball bat. "Dude, now you're talking my language," Seuss said. "Got a spare?" "Sure. Come on and I'll fix you up. We'll meet y'all at the Jeep." It took a little more than 5 minutes, but not long afterward the Jeep, with its 4 passengers hanging on desperately, lurched out through the gates, hung a tire squealing left at the first intersection, and tore off through the night toward the unknown. As he took the road west, Seuss asked Stanford to call Melody and let her know where they were going. "I feel like a real dum-dum," Seuss said apologetically. "I mean, my phone was docked right there next to the bed and all." "Don't worry about it," Grunkle Ford said, thumbing in the number. "Amazing things, these cellular phones. Stanley, did you know that one of my patents made possible the development of these devices?" "Do tell," grumbled Grunkle Stan. "Whoop-ty I do. Yes, Stanford said absently. The amount of royalties it's brought in really astonished me. Hello, Melody? Listen, this is Stanford Pines. Seuss is driving, but he wanted me to catch you up on things. Quickly, Ford gave her the details, winding up. We'll be starting at the site of the old McGucket house, heading west from there. I'm afraid that's all we really know at this point. Yes. Yes, of course. He held the phone away from his ear and said, "She loves you, Seuss." Cool, Seuss said. Tell her I love her too. He loves you, oh, you heard. Yes, we'll be in touch. No, you couldn't do anything, really. In fact, we're not even sure what might have to be done. Yes, thanks. Bye. Squeezed between Grunkle Stan and the bony Fiddleford McGucket in the back seat, Dipper chewed on his lip and worried. He kept a sharp lookout, but the Jeep's headlights showed no sign of a 13-year-old girl. Don't let us be too late, Dipper mentally begged the fates. After a few minutes, when they were close to the spot, Grunkle Ford said, "Hey, I know this territory. This is where I ran into the gnomes. I interviewed one named Schmebulok, Sr., for my journal." Yeah, Dipper said. The gnomes told us about Creepy Hollow and the cave in the bluff, the Ghack of Doom. That I've never heard of, Ford said. Me, neither, Stanley agreed. It sounds right fearsome, mumbled Fiddleford. Hey, we've faced worse, Stanley said encouragingly. And this time we're all together. One team. Stanford added. As he turned into a curve, Seuss said, "You know what we need? Like, our own team song, Dogs. And maybe trucker hats with our logo on them. And jerseys. And we could market water coolers, too." Perhaps fortunately for them all, they reached the overgrown drive before Seuss could think of any fight song lyrics. The Jeep jounced over uneven ground, weaving between the bigger saplings, crushing the smaller ones. Overhead the sky flared with light now and then, distant lightning, not close enough to roll its thunder over them yet, but bright enough to outline the rim of the bluffs enclosing Gravity Falls Valley. "Rain's a-comin'," Fiddleford said. "My wrist has always hurt in rainy weather since I busted that bone in Merm." Actually, Stanford said in a lecture hall voice, "there's no objective scientific evidence." "Hey, egghead," Stanley cut in, "try listening to your friend with your ears, not your brain, okay?" "Okay," Stanford said. "Sorry, Fiddleford." McGucket acted as though he hadn't heard. "You know, I've been trying to remember just where our old house was, and I just now got it. Not far now. It's gonna be rough on me to see what's left of it." "There's not much," Dipper said softly. "Just some burned timbers and part of a stone chimney." "Just a ruin," Fiddleford muttered, shaking his head. "Same as my life." Seuss braked when the headlights shone on the sad remains of the log cottage. They all climbed out of the Jeep as Seuss killed the engine and the lights. Ford switched on a powerful flashlight and shone it across a stretch of grass that had grown more than knee-high. "Fiddleford, I'm so sorry," he said as the beam painted the broken chimney, pale gray stone pale against the dark canvas of the night. A flicker of lightning showed Fiddleford standing at the edge of the old cellar with bowed head. "It weren't your fault. It was mine. I just wasn't brave enough to face my fears. Took the coward's way out of forgettin'. Making myself forget." Another flash of lightning, and he straightened his shoulders. "Well, no more o' that. Where do we go from here, Dipper? You take the lead." "Up this hill," Dipper said, switching on his own flashlight. "This is where the gnomes live, but they won't hurt you. Probably. Come on." He scrambled upward. A distant growl of thunder threatened storm, and the air smelled of approaching rain. It can't be too far, Dipper thought. Not more than a couple miles, maybe we'll catch up to Mabel. He heard the others floundering up the hillside behind him, but he didn't slow. "Hey, gnomes," he yelled. "This is me, Dipper Pines. Anybody here seen my sister tonight?" The The wind in the trees and the anxious-sounding crickets answered him, but that was all. Dipper kept flashing his light at the ground, but he could see no footprints, no sign that Mabel had come this way at all. Could I have been wrong? Could we have missed her back on the road here? He tried to reason it out. Mabel had about a 2-hour start, probably. With that, if she walked fast, she could have reached the site of the old McGucket house by the time they had left in the jeep. It had taken 20 minutes or so for them to get to the ruins of the house, and in that time she might have gone a mile on foot, probably less, because in the woods the ferny undergrowth would have hindered her. Half a mile, maybe? And she was barefoot, and that would have slowed her. Dipper reached a spot where the hazel trees came to an abrupt break. Ahead of him the ground fell away into what looked like an immense bowl. A streak of lightning, followed by an earth-shaking boom of thunder, showed him the land ahead was indeed a depression, sandy ground spiked with random, scrubby brush. Beyond it the bluffs rose almost sheer. "This must be Creepy Hollow," Dipper yelled back. Faintly, he heard his Grunkle Ford's voice from off behind him. "Dipper! Wait for us!" But Dipper couldn't even see the beam of Ford's flashlight. "I'm going ahead," he yelled back. He half stumbled, half skidded down the embankment into the semi-barren depression. "It's like a meteor crater," he thought, and immediately yelped. Something had his legs. No, he was sinking. "Help!" he yelled. "Quicksand!" Someone grabbed his flailing wrist and pulled hard, and Dipper toppled forward, his arms outflung. The ground he hit felt solid. "Thanks," he said into the darkness. "Mabel? Is that you?" "Not quite," said a whispery voice. "You," he shouted. "Hurry up, Ford," urged Stanley. "I am hurrying," Stanford snapped. "We're off the trail here, if you haven't noticed." Seuss had forged a little ahead. "Dudes! I see his flashlight." He waved his own and yelled, "Dipper! Over here, dog!" After a moment, he said, "Oh, yeah, here he comes." A few seconds later, Dipper stumbled out of the ferns, an arm raised to shield his eyes. "Hey, guys, don't blind me." "Sorry," Seuss said, lowering the beam of his flashlight. "Listen," Dipper said urgently, "I ran into some of the gnomes. They told me that Mabel came this way not too long ago. She went straight across Creepy Hollow. The gnomes say we'll see and hear spooky stuff, but it's all illusion and can't hurt us, and then into the cave they call the Ghack of Doom." "Good work, Dipper," Ford said. "Lead on." Wait, Dipper said. "Let me catch my breath. Here's the thing, guys, the gnomes say there's a monster inside the cave. Not an illusion. A real monster. They don't know what it is, but they call it a dragon. Get this, it controls butterflies, the orange ones with the triangle marks. It sends them out to find victims and mark them. And once the victim is marked and the outline turns blue, the dragon can call the victim to it and into its home." "Let's go," Seuss said. "Mabel's in there with a dragon." "Wait," Dipper pleaded again. "Guys, the gnomes told me the dragon doesn't kill its victims. It keeps them prisoner inside the cave and somehow feeds on them without killing them. It has a woman in there now, but she was taken years and years ago. That totally has to be Mr. McGucket's wife." Seuss exclaimed. "May Ellen?" McGucket said, his voice choking. "All this time I thought she'd run away from me, and instead she was captured by some supernatural critter? Come on. I want to kill it." Dipper led the way to the edge of the broad, bowl-like valley. "The cave opening's on the far side," he said. "Nearly straight across." A flashlight beam enveloped Dipper, and Grunkle Stan said, "Am I crazy, or have you shrunk a little bit tonight?" "Trick of the light, I guess," Dipper said. Thunder sounded like a runaway train rumbling across the sky above them, and he said, "Let's go before the storm breaks. Straight across, and don't listen or react to anything you hear or see." He rushed down the rim of the valley, then hurried across the sandy, rocky soil. He pulled up short, his flashlight beam focused on a scraggly serviceberry bush ahead. "Is that Mabel's hair ribbon?" "Yeah," Stanley said, pushing him aside and reaching for the fluttering lavender ribbon. "I recognize, what th?" he thrashed. To the others it looked as if Stan had suddenly gone crazy. He twisted and jerked and cursed, his arm still thrust in among the branches. To Stan, the brush had come alive and had seized his wrist, tightening its trip, threatening to break his bones. "Sleeve caught?" Ford asked, stepping forward to help. He froze as he heard an all-too-familiar voice, well. "Hiya, Fordsy." "Bill's Cipher," Ford shouted, turning in a tight, frantic circle. "Show yourself." Bill's high-pitched laugh mocked him, and the demon taunted, "I can stay right behind you all night, Fordsy. Don't have eyes in the back of your head to go with your 6 fingers, do you?" "Bill, let me see you." "Hey, hold on, old friend. What are you talking about?" Fiddle Ford asked. "That voice. It was him." "Warn't no voice," Fiddle Ford yelled back. "This one of them hullabalootion tricks Dipper said the gnomes told him about." "Stanley!" Ford yelled. "Close your eyes." He closed his own, and the sounds of Bill's taunting laughter faded to nothing. "Hey, I got my arm back," Stanley said. "Looky here," Fiddle Ford said firmly. "Stanford, you grab a hold of my belt in the back. Stanley, you grab onto his end. Seuss, you take a hold onto Stanley's shirt. Dipper, you walk right beside me and close your eyes if there's any trouble. I'll lead the way across. But what if you run into an illusion?" "Shucks," Fiddle Ford said with his old wild laugh, "I do it all the time. Don't you worry none, I done learnt to ignore 'em." "Keep an eye on Dipper," Stanley warned. "I will. Come on, we got a dangerous wilderness to cross."